Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'm covering Season 1, Episode 5, The Stock Tip. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I am doing okay. My kids are in their last week of school and they have that energy, that last week of school energy, and I just love it. Oh my gosh, that just anticipation of sleeping in and no homework, and they just are counting down the hours. I feel so lucky that they were able to go in person through this COVID madness. It was nerve-wracking for sure. Wasn't sure. Our school had given us the option of doing remote learning or in person, and after torturing myself with the decision, I felt pretty good considering my kids' school did a lot to ensure safety and they had a lot of protocols in place, and it really turned out better than I even imagined. I really was preparing myself for 3 weeks into school, they would have to quarantine everyone again. But only my son's class had to quarantine for 10 days because of a possible exposure. But luckily, it didn't turn into any kind of an outbreak, and the whole school didn't have an outbreak the entire year. So it is not lost on me how incredibly lucky we've been that my kids were able to have somewhat of a normal school year. All right, so let's get into the episode. This episode, The Stock Tip, has the following synopsis in my coffee table book. After George receives a stock tip, he and Jerry take the financial plunge. Jerry sells his shares at a huge loss, while George hangs on and winds up making $8,000. Elaine's boyfriend owns cats who wreak havoc on her allergies. After Elaine gives him an ultimatum, the boyfriend chooses to keep the cats and dump her. Meanwhile, Jerry's weekend getaway with new girlfriend Vanessa proves to be a relationship killer, and Kramer shares his idea for a rollout tie dispenser. This episode is written by Jerry and Larry. If I were to describe this episode in just kind of one phrase, I would say a swing and a miss. And this might have to do with the fact that I don't really follow the stock market. I don't care about stocks. So perhaps that's weighing in on my decision here, but I don't really think it's great even if you are a stock market person. This whole episode just didn't have enough that Seinfeld flavor to keep me interested in any of the storylines, quite frankly. While Mail and Bonding was sort of chock full of that Seinfeld flavor, this just needed more of it. It just felt so thin that the plot of this whole stock tip thing was just such a flimsy storyline for me. With that being said, I mean, the episode revolves around this whole stock tip plot, but the weekend trip with a new girlfriend. So that whole plot with Jerry and Vanessa going to Vermont together, that felt far more of a Seinfeldian. Okay, I'm using that term. I know I said it for the first time last week, and I definitely didn't make it up, but it's going to be in the rotation. So the whole, oh my gosh, what can a weekend trip with a relatively new girlfriend, what could that mean for the relationship? That is so much more compelling to me. So I just wish that the ratio of time spent on the stock tip versus the plot line of Jerry and Vanessa going together to Vermont, I would just wish those were flipped, because it just would have made for a much more interesting episode for me. We start the episode out in Monk's. Elaine arrives. She's late because she dropped a grape. Yeah, she dropped it and it disappeared. And whatever. I mean, it's a relatable thing, and so relatable, in fact, that the first time I was taking notes for this episode and watched it all the way through with all the extras that were included, later that day I went to Target. And as I was walking in the parking lot and I took off my mask, one of my earrings fell out and I heard it hit the concrete and it disappeared. I mean, we were all like, it was a whole family trip to Target, family Target run. And my kids were looking for it, my husband. I mean, it was crazy. It should have stood out theoretically on black pavement, this silver dangly earring, but it literally disappeared. So I just thought that was a little bit funny. I mean, this whole dropping the grape and it disappeared thing wasn't super interesting in the episode, but I had a relatable moment later that day. And yeah, I was really bummed because it was an earring and it was from India. It was a wedding gift from a relative in India. So I was really bummed to not find it. Elaine mentions her boyfriend, Robert, and he has 2 cats. She's allergic to them. I did love the Jerry and Elaine mentioning the name of each other's boyfriend, girlfriend. Elaine started talking about this guy she's seeing. Jerry's the one that jumps in with Robert. And same thing when Jerry mentions this girl I'm seeing, Vanessa. I feel like this was very much illustrating how they can talk about other people. They are dating, which was established at the end of the stakeout. Hey, we got to be able to talk about other people if we're going to make this work. It seemed like Jerry and Larry really wanted to sort of drive home that point. You know, they established that at the end of the stakeout. Hey, we can talk about other people. I liked that it was subtle enough. And even just the mentioning of the name, it was very much like, yeah, I'm cool with it. Vanessa, right? Oh, Robert. Yeah. It's sort of like a little bit overdoing it. But I liked that. I felt that was pretty grounded and pretty real. During the scene, Elaine does that spoon trick where she's rubbing the spoon on her nose and then it hangs off of her nose. I think this is just my theory based on what I talked about in the last episode where Julia Louis-Dreyfus did not feel like she was getting enough quality material. I really think this might have been her attempt at doing something comedic because she's not really getting anything in the dialogue that's funny or any kind of actions that are funny. So it might have been in the script. It might have been predetermined. It wasn't JLD's choice, but my instinct is telling me that she's like, hey, and rather than just sitting here with my dry ass dialogue, can I at least do something kind of funny with the spoon? When Jerry starts talking about Vanessa and perhaps taking a trip with her, Elaine mentions the place in Vermont. I'm going back to the whole specificity thing that separate faucets for the hot and cold. I love that. It really does encompass a charming inn in Vermont. I think I could totally see it as soon as she says that. Oh, the separate faucets for the hot and cold. Yes, I love that detail. Details matter. I feel like Kramer. Poise counts. Details count. It's just as important as the other ones. Anyway, you're getting a little bit of a glimpse into my head. These tangents of Seinfeld references are constantly firing in my brain. So that's just a little bit of a glimpse of that for you. Enjoy. Once again, we hear about Elaine's financial situation when George is talking about the stock and telling them that they should get in on it. She says, I would, but I don't have any money. It got me thinking a little bit. Does this really add up? And I'm not saying Elaine, she needs to be rich and privileged or anything like that. But as we know later, she grew up going to the finest finishing schools on the Eastern Seaboard. She went to Tufts, which I did a little research. Tufts is tough to get into. Oh, I just lost a bunch of you with that. That's all right. No, it's not. Please keep listening. You need a very high GPA, at least a 1530 on your SATs, and a 35 on your ACTs. That's tough to get into Tufts. Okay, that's the last time, I promise. So, Elaine's super smart, and she went to a great college. I just feel like the fact that she's not doing a bit better is a little bit inconsistent with these facts. And it's totally possible that they hadn't established that about the Elaine character prior to that. But if she was definitely based on Monica Yates, she sort of had that similar background. So at any rate, it's not a big deal, but it just got me thinking, hey, does this add up? I just felt a little bit like, would she be this broke having the background and education that she had? In the 90s, I should mention, now, it's really sad. People with advanced degrees are having tough times finding jobs. So, but I'm just trying to think of it in that time period where it could have been a little bit more possible for her to be more financially stable. Certainly more than a stand-up comic. I mean, we don't think, at least at this point, Jerry's career isn't like he's super famous or anything. So he can be okay in New York City. You would think someone with Elaine's background could be doing at least as well as he is. So just some thoughts that I put together about Elaine's financial situation. We see our first glimpse of activist Elaine when Jerry tries to order tuna. They're dying in the nets, she says about the dolphins. And Jerry folds, and then George orders it with no hesitation. I love that he just says, I'll have the tuna. This is a really good, it's very quick, but it shows the difference in the relationship of Jerry and Elaine and George and Elaine. Jerry and Elaine, they may be exes, but Jerry still feels a pull to, not upset her for now. We know that changes later. And George has no stakes in this, so he's like, I don't give a shit. I'm ordering the tuna. I want the tuna. The purpose of this scene is setting up the stock tip plot, Elaine's boyfriend, and Jerry's trip with Vanessa. It's blah. The grape thing was really weak, especially the filler dialogue of Jerry talking about the mutant grape, and it was just weird. And I'm glad that they had that. It was sort of awkward and it seemed out of place, but they had that shot of Elaine with zero reaction when Jerry was doing his mutated grape bit. My reaction was the same. I was just staring at the screen like she was staring at Jerry. And even with all of Jason Alexander's effort, I was so uninterested in the whole stock tip plot from the get-go. Ugh. The next scene, Jerry and Vanessa are shopping in a little bodega. Wow. They really changed a lot about Vanessa from what we saw in the stakeout. Now, it was mentioned that Larry David was insistent that they bring this character back since there was no definitive breakup since the stakeout episode. At the end of the stakeout, she agrees to go out with him, and that was never negated. So he felt, well, we should bring her back. It would be only natural that they would be still dating since we have told the audience nothing different. Right away, she's not as charming, but to be fair, she's not given a lot of interesting dialogue. She was really just kind of a device in that scene to set up all of Jerry's lines about the head turn bit at the movie theater, speeding up the intimacy with going away and going to phase 2 in the relationship and all that, looking at the paper for the stock. This is where you can see, and it sounds like I'm really knocking Lynn Clark as an actress, and more than knocking her, I'm really just praising JLD more. Her contribution to this scene as written was nothing, and that's on the writer's part for sure. But I just feel like this shows if you don't have an actress with the same skill set as a Julia Louis-Dreyfus, writing this type of a scene, you just get lost in it. She's very forgettable in this scene. But I feel like if Julia Louis-Dreyfus did this scene, she would make it better. She would add that magic she always adds to everything. Even if the dialogue isn't fantastic, she has a way to elevate it. And it's very apparent in these early episodes. But back to Vanessa, she was so much more dynamic in that stakeout episode. I think she definitely had more screen time in this episode, but much like what they do with Elaine, the substance is just not that great. In the stakeout, the chemistry was so palpable with Jerry, and in this one, there was zero chemistry. It felt very flat. She was that female trope I talked about in a previous episode where, the woman always has to be this kind of drip and just being super uptight and annoyed with the guy. So they really made her out to be that in this episode. It was also very odd to see Jerry wanting to move forward in the relationship to phase 2. I mean, that's such a reversal from what we see of Jerry's dating life in the future episodes where, it might be the woman who wants to move it forward and he doesn't want to. He never really wants to. Jerry, you break up with a woman every week. So the whole purpose of this scene is to reintroduce Vanessa and establish they are going to take the trip to Vermont. Jerry is obsessing over the stock. He invested and the stock is still down, the way Vanessa says it. My overall take on this scene, it's pretty flat. It was a forced bit to do that little head turn in the theater thing, which I have to say, I've seen many comedians do a version of this bit. It's not so blatant as like plagiarizing other comedians, but Ellen DeGeneres definitely did this in her HBO special about 20 years ago. She does a whole bit about how she turns her head if people are being noisy in a theater. So it seems like one of those very common comedic bits. And finally, Vanessa just seems much less compelling than before. They really muted so many of the things that I liked about her in the stakeout in this episode. The next couple of scenes I'm not really going to talk about. One's in Jerry's apartment, one's in the dry cleaners. Again, it's just focusing on the whole stock tip crap, which I don't care about. The next scene with Elaine is where she's at Jerry's apartment. She's sneezing. She's really suffering from these cat allergies. And they have the conversation about rubbing out the cats. This is our first glimpse of Elaine's disdain for pets in general. She orchestrated Roxy, the dog from her courtyard, to be kidnapped by Newman in the future. We know that. Again, this is just filler dialogue, nothing very great about it. Before we get back to the damn stock shit, this is yet another example of JLD getting screen time, but barely anything of real substance. The purpose of this scene is Elaine is pretty much losing hope about her relationship as her allergies get worse. George is distraught because the guy who gave, you know what, I don't care, whatever, stock shit, he's distraught. My overall take on this scene is another meh, moving the stock plot forward while my interest in the stock plot is only going backward. The next scene in Vermont. So we're at the inn with Jerry and Vanessa. It's not going well. We can see that right away. I do like that they have the voiceover again for Jerry's thoughts. It's a nice bookend from where we started with Vanessa. Except this time the thoughts in his head are very different from the stakeout. They're all very negative and very tortured. And Vanessa is the worst in this scene. Oh my God. She actually reminded me of my kids when they were pouting. Like, I don't know. I don't want to do anything. Oh gosh. And then the whole perfume thing where she doesn't want to tell Jerry where she got her perfume or what her perfume is. It's just super annoying and bizarre. And it's a perfect little thing to really understand how badly this weekend is going. It's probably like a regular perfume you could get at Macy's, but she's just at this point with Jerry where she doesn't want to tell him. It's just a little kind of like needle she's digging in. And yeah, even though it makes no sense, I think it's actually like a perfect little thing that they put in there to make it very apparent how much this weekend has devolved the relationship. And then her little, I told you not to sell, all condescending to Jerry after he checks the paper. STFU, Vanessa, okay? He doesn't need that right now. And then I really had the most issue with her snarky comment to Jerry about basically how crappy the inn is. Oh, you lost that money, which is probably why we're staying here. I mean, are you kidding me? Isn't she a fucking lawyer? You're telling me, Vanessa, you couldn't have pitched in or, I mean, again, like just that whole thing. And it doesn't add up. She was not presented as this type of woman in that first episode she was in. We kind of see her as this very easygoing and charming woman who, it should be mentioned, doesn't seem to mind that she was staked out. She knows she was, but in that episode, she's amused by it and flattered. And she mentions in the stakeout that she almost exclusively dates immature men. So she just seems a lot more easygoing in that episode. It's very jarring to have the next time we see her, she's totally devoid of those traits. The purpose of this scene is to see how the Vermont trip was indeed a relationship killer. And just to get a little bit more into this whole switch of Vanessa's character, I think ultimately what bothers me about it is that the awkwardness of this scene is not earned at all, which is why I think if they dedicated more time to this Jerry-Vanessa storyline versus the stock tip shit, it would have made more sense. If it was built up a little bit more, maybe we could have seen a scene when they first get there and everything's okay, and then little things keep chipping away. I don't know. There just needed to be more of a build up to this awkward scene that we see. Because in the episode, what we're shown is we go from this little hesitation about the trip when they're shopping together to just complete misery on the trip. 5 out of the 7 scenes in the episode are mostly about the stock plot. And I realize it's meant to be the A storyline of the episode, unfortunately. But if they just had made that shift to dedicate more time to the Vermont inn and the whole relationship killer of a little weekend getaway, it just would have made for a better episode. It would have made for a great episode, but just a better episode. Finally, the last scene is the monks' celebration. After George's windfall of $8,000, we see that Elaine was dumped for the cats. I liked her retort to Jerry about him getting dumped for a perfume. So they needed to establish that both Jerry and Elaine are single again. I did notice Elaine waving the cigar smoke away from George is smoking a cigar. So that's our kind of first glimpse of her ongoing aversion to smoking. Although she does abandon that when she becomes president of J. Peterman and she's smoking away on that cigar. I like the moment where Jerry reminds Elaine about the Superman reversing the Earth's rotation. We went over that. And it just makes me wonder how much of their relationship entailed Superman education. I would have to believe it was quite a bit. There was a lot of Superman talk. When you're dating Jerry Seinfeld, you can't avoid that. So the purpose of the scene is that George ended up clearing $8,000 while Jerry lost a lot of money. Jerry and Elaine both got dumped. And just another thing I noticed, the fanciest place George will host a celebration meal is at Monk's. And that's just very George. The overall take on this scene, it's fine. It wraps up all the plots involved. Whatever. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick break and I'll see you on the other side. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's it's funny.
You've seen him leap tall buildings in a single bound, lift cars with one arm, even reverse the Earth's rotation. But get ready to see him do comedy. The Superman Comedy Tour, Man of Squeal, is coming to a comedy club near you this summer. See the superhero crush observational humor like he crushes the villains of Metropolis.
What's the deal with brick walls that don't crumble?
Clark Kent's alter ego takes on relationships.
I had to learn the hard way not to use my X-ray vision on a first date. How was I supposed to know she was embarrassed about that birthmark on her ass? Lois Lane takes an hour to get ready. All I need is a phone booth and I'm back in 2 seconds.
And don't get him started on his fellow superheroes.
All I'm saying is Batman wouldn't need those fancy gadgets if his original gadget wasn't so small. Trust me, Robin likes to gossip.
Come see a side of Superman you've never seen before. The Superman Comedy Tour, Man of Squeal. Flying into your town soon.
I'll tell you what's worse than kryptonite. Setting that damn clock on my VCR!
And we're back. There weren't too many extras on the DVD for this episode. In fact, there was pretty much nothing. There was notes about nothing. There was a few things on there I'd like to mention. This was the first time Superman was mentioned in the series. The boyfriend counter, they have a boyfriend counter in this notes about nothing and girlfriend counter for each character. The boyfriend counter said that Robert the cat guy was Elaine's second boyfriend in the series. I did wonder, I said perhaps this cat guy is the Wall Street guy she mentioned in the stakeout, but apparently not. It's a separate person. All right, so the next note about nothing really sent me down a path of, well, I mean, a lot of thought and reflection, and I love when that happens. So the note said, casting women as Jerry, George, and Kramer's girlfriends on the series, the casting director said it was very difficult because to find a woman who was both beautiful and funny proved challenging. Okay. I am totally being cognizant of the time that this whole thing was taking place 30 years ago. And so I'm well aware of that. And we've come a long way with the whole, women in comedy and are women really funny? And women always have to have some kind of physical allure, no matter what type of career they have, if it's in comedy or drama. I mean, looks are just the number one thing. I mean, and it's still true to this day. Think about, I know it's not in the air anymore, but like King of Queens or According to Jim. I read a few really well-written articles about just this phenomenon of these wives who are matched with, for lack of a better term, these kind of dumpy husbands. And that's just been the norm for a lot of family sitcoms. There was an excerpt from one of the articles talking about Courtney Thorne-Smith. She played, and I never watched the show, but she played the wife of Jim Belushi in According to Jim. And she was very open about how she was expected to maintain this perfect body. You know, she needed to look good, while Jim Belushi, it just didn't fucking matter. You know, he could let himself go as much as he wanted. It didn't matter. But also, she had to be talented. She had to be a good actress, and she had to keep up with the comedy of it. So I'm sure that there wasn't this pressure on the casting director of Seinfeld to make sure Elaine's boyfriends were super hot guys and also funny. So it's just a double standard that's very apparent. And would it be so terrible with matching Jerry, George, and Kramer with women who are, I don't know, a little bit more believably in their league? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess in the 90s it was. Women had to be eye candy above anything else. And it reminded me when I was going down this path of thought, on two separate occasions while watching Seinfeld with a significant other, so one was my boyfriend from college, one is my now husband, this question that they both asked, literally word for word, happened at least 15 to 20 years apart. But we were watching an episode, and after Jerry's girlfriend was shown, both of them turned to me, again, 15 to 20 years apart, separate times. They both turned to me and said, "Is Jerry good looking? Is he like hot?" The reason they were asking that was because of the caliber and beauty of the woman shown as his girlfriend. And even further than that, my college boyfriend, we were watching the episode where George is trying to court photo store Sheila, and she's this super cute, blonde, blue eyes, and super young, I should say. She seemed way younger than George, but that's a whole other issue. And so my college boyfriend said, "Oh my God, like she would ever go for George." And I couldn't disagree, but it was just like one of those things that would just get shrugged off. And I shrugged it off too. I was like, well, whatever. I don't know. Conversely, when women have tried to do this, Lena Dunham, for example, she got a lot of heat when she would cast quote unquote hotter guys than herself on her show Girls. How unrealistic it was, and how she was just indulging her personal wishes versus making a point as an artist. It was really venomous criticism she got for that. And full disclosure, I was not a fan of Girls. I watched the first 2 seasons. I tried to get into it. It's just, there were many things about it I found maddening, but, and even further disclosure, I definitely was one of those jerks who said those things too about her casting these men. Particularly, it was after an episode where she and this hot doctor who was played by Patrick Wilson, it was kind of a bottle episode. They spent a whole like sex-filled weekend together at his brownstone. And I said some of those things. I'm like, that would never happen. Oh my God, he would never, hook up with her. I am not proud of those thoughts I had. Clearly, I was projecting maybe my own issues with that. And I can see that now. And I've reflected a lot about why I had that reaction. And the more I thought about it, I felt so shitty that my brain had been conditioned to tell me that that wasn't possible. And that's what launched me into all that criticism. I mean, I barely batted an eye at loads of sitcoms that showed these plain average guys with hot girls, but, give me 30 minutes of the reverse and I spit this totally hypocritical venom. Not proud, not at all proud of that, but I'm glad that I see now the value of these women doing that. Honestly, it needs to happen. You know what? Men have been doing this since television was invented. So if it bothers you that women are doing it now, then you really need to look at yourself. You really need to look at why that bothers you so much. Because I did. And I said those terrible things and I thought those terrible things. But now I reflect on it and I say, carry on, ladies. And let's also normalize normal looks, normal bodies. Let's focus on people's real talent. And then we can see a positive impact on our kids and self-esteem. Focus on the content of what people are bringing versus just how they look. Okay, wow. That was a tangent. A real tangent. But I also love getting in these types of discussions. Please let me know what you think about this. I'm certainly one woman here in Colorado thinking about this stuff. All right, let's go to Contributor Corner. I did get some thoughts about this episode from some of my contributors. I'm so excited to share them with you. So first, we have a comment from contributor Lee. Lee and I met writing a sketch show for the Bovine Metropolis Theater here in Denver, which unfortunately shut down, but did not survive COVID, unfortunately. Really, really big tragedy for the improv and sketch scene here in Denver. But Lee and I met there last summer, but the last, I guess, real summer in 2019, we co-wrote and starred in a wonderful sketch show together. I had a blast with Lee. He's a fantastic writer, and I believe, I want to get the number right, I think he wrote about 78 sketches in like 12 weeks. He's a machine. Anyway, Lee sent in an email with his comments, and this is what he had to say about the episode. My favorite exchange was when Elaine and Jerry joked about killing her boyfriend's cats. It was a twisted exchange made all the funnier because Elaine had presented herself earlier in the episode as a dolphin animal lover. Yes, Lee, I totally didn't even think about that. It's like she has compassion for animals in the sea, or maybe just like big animals that can't be pets, perhaps, but certainly not cats or dogs. Lee goes on to say, my second favorite moment was when Elaine balanced the spoon on her nose in the diner. It wasn't so much that it was funny, but it made the scene seem more authentic. Jerry and George did not have a strong reaction, suggesting that this was something she does regularly. It showed the goofy side of Elaine's personality without being cartoonish. Yes, and I think this is kind of echoing what I was saying earlier, too, about Julia Louis-Dreyfus attempting to do something silly when her actual dialogue wasn't very strong. And finally, Lee said, the scene in the laundry was extraneous. I didn't find it funny, revealing, or advancing the story whatsoever. Exactly, Lee. This is why I didn't even want to cover it in the episode, because it didn't really do much. I think it really was just a device for Jerry to do his kind of always hating a dry cleaner bit. He revisits that a lot, I feel, in his comedy and throughout the series. Thank you so much, Lee. Those were great comments. Okay, next I have an email from Sarah Constantakis. Now, you might remember Sarah sent in a great audio clip for the stakeout. This time she sent an email, and this is what she had to say. This is one of many episodes that reference what I'll call Elaine's faceless suitors. Guys she's dating who we don't meet in the episode, but her discussions about them with the other characters form the bulk of her storyline in the episode. These suitors usually have an identifying feature. In this episode, it's his cats that she's allergic to. In later episodes and seasons, we start to actually meet guys that she dates. So this episode got me thinking about the extent to which Elaine's storylines and character are defined by the guys she dates versus being defined by other things. And I'm looking forward to rewatching with that lens and seeing how it plays out. This is such a great observation, Sarah. I really do wonder why they didn't show her suitors for a while. Her boyfriends were definitely faceless. Such a great observation. Thank you so much for sending that in. That really got me thinking as well. Perhaps it was a budget thing. Let's invest in actually showing only Jerry's girlfriends. We don't have time for Elaine's boyfriends. Who knows? But I love that observation. Thank you so much. And Sarah also sent in what she calls more trivial observations. In this watching, I noticed that Elaine is portrayed as an animal lover, with her comment giving Jerry a hard time for eating tuna because tuna fishing is dangerous to dolphins. But later in the episode, she talks about taking out her suitor's cats. She says that totally jokingly, of course, but it's still kind of an interesting juxtaposition. It also made me think of her other episodes where Elaine was disturbed in some way by other people's pets. The episode when she enlists Kramer and Newman to kidnap her neighbor's yapping dog, or the one where she gets Kramer to bring his meat slicer to feed her neighbor's meowing cat. Oh my gosh, so many great observations. Yeah, Elaine's relationship to animals. It's very interesting. And we're definitely going to see her aversion to fur in a future episode, maybe more than that, but subsequently her abandonment of that. Anti-fur. Who has the time, or whatever she says. So yeah, this is all really, really fun observations. I love that both Lee and Sarah had the same comment about she wants to rub out the cats, but she wants to protect the dolphins. So funny. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, and the last contributor we have some comments from, another email, is from Sheil. Full disclosure, Sheil is my brother. And so he and I watched Seinfeld together when we were younger. We actually taped it on a VCR. We had tapes and tapes labeled Seinfeld and protected them because we were like, don't tape over Seinfeld when we needed to tape something else on TV. And a lot of great memories with my brother watching this show and laughing together and just enjoying that humor, that offbeat humor. And I just wanted to give you some background on Sheil's Seinfeld story. He says, I was 14 when Seinfeld first aired. And what could appeal more to a suburban teenage pubescent boy than four 30-somethings living in New York talking about nothing? I guess I really didn't get into it until the second season when I was a very mature 15 and Seinfeld was after Cheers. It was easy enough to say goodbye to Sam, Diane, and the bunch for the week and check out this new show at 9:30. I remember the humor being very different than other shows I watched, and enough weird stuff kept happening to keep me coming back. The episode The Jacket was pretty funny, but I think I became a big fan of the show with The Chinese Restaurant. Sheil's 3 favorite things about Elaine Benes: number 1, her face is like a frying pan. Number 2, she's queen of the castle. And number 3, Elaine is as terrible as Kramer, George, and Jerry, but looks amazing in a sari. Agreed. So this is what Sheil had to say about the stock tip. In the stock tip, Jerry, George, and Elaine are each faced with an opportunity to take a gamble. George and Jerry have the chance to make some money on a stock. Additionally, Jerry is betting that a weekend away with his new girlfriend will advance their relationship. Elaine is gambling that her boyfriend will choose her over his cats. In this early episode, it is apparent that Larry and Jerry still don't know how to incorporate Julia into the plot. It seems crazy in retrospect considering how her immense talent was being underutilized. Elaine was just there to listen to Jerry's anxiety over his loss on Sendrax and talk about a boyfriend she never has a scene with. Her acting is fine, but the script really didn't give her much to flex her comedic muscles. But Larry and Jerry were developing their writing style and had not yet found the way to write for each character in one episode. I give this episode 2 little kicks out of 10. Thanks, Sheil. I love that Sheil noticed this overarching theme of gambling with all the characters. I didn't even think about it that way. It's so true. And he does mention a lot of the things that I've talked about with Elaine being underutilized and Larry and Jerry just trying to really figure out how to write a sitcom and how to incorporate these characters. Later on, we will talk about this idea, and this was spoken about a lot on the Signcast podcast that I listened to and I mentioned, this dovetailing of storylines, which became kind of the structure of the show going forward, where every single plot kind of dovetails at the end and somehow they all intertwine and affect each other and get resolved together. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that as the series goes on. But yeah, for sure in this stage right now with the stock tip, well, all the episodes in season 1, it's very clear Larry and Jerry are figuring this out, just like Sheil said. Thank you so much, Sheil. I really appreciate all the contributors sending these thoughts in. They always bring such wonderful perspectives, and I hope to keep getting more of these. And if you would like to participate as a contributor, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. And you could possibly send in some thoughts just like Sarah, Lee, and Sheil did. Sarah Lee. Oh, now I want cheesecake. Now, normally I'd talk about my favorite Elaine moments. There really isn't one to speak of, unfortunately. I guess if I were to choose one, it would be the spoon. I don't know. Again, a valiant effort by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but man, just such little substance. She was given so little in this episode. Final general notes, it was a very George-centric episode. Jason Alexander was given the best material by far. He got to flex a lot of comedic muscle in this, lots of different moods, lots of different, types of swagger he had throughout, from being sneaky in the beginning to being distraught in the middle to just kind of having this bravado at the end. So he had such a range to show in this episode. So he was sort of the star. The weekend getaway effect on a couple was the much more compelling story, and I wish they had focused on that more. Give us a build rather than just turning Vanessa into an unrecognizable character. They used the same actress and technically the same character of the same name, but they changed everything about her. Blah. Really not the strongest send-off for season 1. I mean, this was the final of the 4-episode order after the pilot had aired. I think they were very lucky to get another season just based off of these episodes. And I know behind the scenes, they had so many people just kind of pulling for them at the network, and they were so close to being canceled many, many times. And we all know the greatness that is to come. But as for like a season finale, this was not great. Well, I think that's all I can say about the stock tip. And now we are done with season 1. I can't believe it. Well, yeah, I can. Why did I say that? What the hell am I talking about? Thank you so much for listening. I am so looking forward to digging into season 2. I've already watched ahead a little bit just to kind of prep a little bit. And oh my gosh, already these episodes just have so much more substance, and I'm super excited to get into them. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.